Hello, everyone, and welcome back. What a wonderful meeting. I have been enjoying listening to the beautiful poetry that was shared today and the beautiful hearts that were shared today. And actually, I'm taking a prompt from one of the previous speakers, and because the next session is about the artistic and the poetic aspect of the human and plant mind. And we have some really fantastic people coming online. And I guess the perfect provocation came from Prue Gibson, who spoke about sympathetic magic. And I really like that. And I wonder, she talked about playful and loving technique to raise awareness about plants and the environment. So who better than more poets and beautiful artists to show us how to do this in a very creative and playful way. So I'm going to bring in Renata, if you want to bring your screen on and your mic and go for it. Share with us your beautiful work. Thank you.
I'd like to pay respects to the Turrbal and Yagra people, the custodians of the land I'm speaking from today, elders past, present and emerging. And in my 15 years as a biochrom artist, researcher and educator, I worked with people from all walks of life, including home, business owners, art directors, to make environments more creative and engaging, that evoke emotions and also motivate deep care. And I share my experiences with people through various projects, and that's how I met Monica. So 2.5 years ago, I was at Mount Coot-tha Botanic Gardens in Brisbane, installing my artwork for an event, and Monica told me about this exciting project, The Mind of Plants. She was on the lookout for potential contributors for the book and invited me to write a chapter. So to share my experiences of plants, humans relationships. So I'm very grateful for that. And immediately the linden tree came to mind because it was the first relationship that I built with a plant. It was a special tree to our family while living in Poland. And I'll just share a screen to show you that some images. Every July, our mom would take us on a trip to visit our auntie on a farm to collect linden's flowers for tea for the cold Polish winter. Mom would tell us stories about how she would hug the tree since she was a very little girl and how it felt so good. So let me tell you about Tilia cordata, called linden or lime tree or lipa in Polish, and how I collaborate with nature. Linden trees are huge and can grow to 20-30 meters high. In Europe, some of them are 200-300 years old and older. Linden's tea contains medicinal properties and can be used to treat colds, coughs, fever, high blood pressure and headaches. That's among other things. These trees are not native to Australia, where I'm based now. I'm in Queensland, and that this linden research has taken me on a journey to Tasmania, where they must have been brought in from Europe at some stage. And now there is a property called the lindens. Also, I found the linden tree in Toowoomba, a couple of hours drive from Brisbane in Queensland. Well, who would have thought of that? And starting with a childhood family story, the connection extends so far and wide through this project, allowing me to meet plant-loving people, share the story with all of you today as well. In both cases, I not only recreated the memory of my auntie's linden tree, but also embarked on new relationships with and through linden trees in Australia. I'm very grateful to Monica and the people I met on my journey through this project. It would not have happened without them. So regarding my process, I go back to nature. I start with research. I want to understand the cycle of life of the flora that surrounds us. I observe nature's complex rhythms, dynamics, to make sense of existence and peace with oneself. Often I let plants to lead this creative process and also to bring their character and beauty while they are still in a state of decay, which I call the biochrome art, as you can see pictures here. And this process I call the eco-harmony blueprint. It helps me to go through the process of creating and then helping others to connect with nature and to help them also to create home and work harmonious environments. So let me ask you a question. What's your relationship with plants? Do you have one that you can hug or you hug regularly, that maybe one that connects you with your family and someone dear in your life? And maybe you told stories to your children about hugging trees. So if not, maybe you can go to the backyard or a park and hug a tree, and I'm sure it will hug you back. So thank you very much.
Beautiful, Renata. Thank you so much for this amazing sharing, and obviously for this provocation, a great invitation for people to just go outside after this session and take beautiful pictures of the trees around you and share it with us. Let me move on to the next speaker. It's Anne Elvey, and please, if you want to share your screen with us, it would be great.
Thanks, Monica. I'm just going to speak for a minute, and then there's a video that that Leah will play for me. Coast Banksias, Banksia integrifolia, I do not know their Bungarong name, are a common sight in the Bayside suburb where I live. Twisted and gnarled, rooted in sandy soil, they stand like sculptures against the sky. Since I moved to this area almost 11 years ago, Coast Banksias, named for a colonial naturalist, appear often in my poems as uncanny presences, disturbing my settler inhabitation on Bunwarong country. Earlier this week, I walked to the path 10 minutes away by Cananook Creek to record my poem with one of the local Coast Banksias. I have tried to move between myself and the tree in the quite amateur phone video, which Leah will play for you in a moment. You will hear the wind as an accompaniment to the poet's voice. Thanks, Leah. There are many Coast Banksias along this suburban path beside Cananook Creek in Seaford, Victoria, on Bunwarong country. And so I'm reading my poem today under one of them. You can see, if I turn the camera, that the ground is littered with Banksia cones. Coast Banksias Triptych. 1. Annunciation. They buckle at bent elbow and gnarl, silver-sided tongues, slender toward gravity, upward, our green surface to ceiling. Their triple type of cone at seed, bristle and bloom are built as knack. They bank on sand, send search for wet, anchor, appointment and duration. If later a limb shears, falls, or wood one day welcomes flame to step down gristle of bowl, then can whiskers declare for hollowing. 2. Visitation. A tremor of limbs, a tail twitches, discernible habit of host as aloof,
a kind of lumber, as if gait were boldened both, and stopped in stone boots, with sand at toe and feet, not lead, but fibrous tendrils. Why not say roots? Should this convey too much of ancestry? Impossible to forego a species cliché, humankind as tree. Hyphen the others as bare bend to motion. Survival brings the amber of a world assumed. 3. Benediction. A seed scrape bursts from pod. Absences curve inside a woody shell, packed like text before bristle yields to wing, scale to scud. On this path, littered with twig and tempt, anticipation of strangers, keys in hand, when every tactic taught is useless. Probable harm becomes bread, honey, a full moon, invisible by day, a cone crammed with closed cups, its weight on a palm, fist round the fit of a thing.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was beautiful. I loved how you disappeared in the tree to cover the space in the camera. So excellent. Thank you so much for your share. Thank you. And I'd like to call in another poet, beautiful Luke Fisher. Please get your screen up and your microphones on, and we'd love to hear your poetry too.
Thank you so much, Monica, and also to John and Patricia for the huge amount of work you've put into this Mind of Plants project. I'd also like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional land of the Gadigal, Bidjigal and Birigal peoples, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I'm in Sydney, and more specifically Bondi. So I'm going to share a revised extract from my essay for the Mind of Plants volume on the horse chestnut tree, but also about metaphors and what they can reveal. As is the case for many poets, a central part of my creative process involves drawing metaphorical connections between diverse beings. But it is now well known that metaphors are not exclusive to poetry or literature. They play a crucial role in virtually all forms of language. Anyone who digs a little beneath the surface of words will find countless cases in which the literal meaning of a commonly used word originated in a metaphorical utterance. Over time, the metaphor withers and fades, and we are left with a literal meaning. If, for example, someone speaks of human culture today, we don't tend to give any thought to the agricultural metaphor buried in the Latinate word, to the fact that culture derives from the sense of cultivating the land, the culture of soil. A metaphor can be loosely defined as any utterance that conveys one subject matter in terms that, from a literal point of view, apply to another. It can do this in more direct or less direct ways. When Shakespeare writes Juliet is the sun, he explicitly identifies Juliet and the sun by means of the copula is. Although the grammatical form is the same as a literal statement, such as Juliet is a woman or Mars is a planet, as readers we nevertheless understand that Shakespeare does not mean that Juliet is literally the sun. The reader is thus invited to draw illuminating connections between Juliet and the sun while distinguishing their differences. Metaphors can also be more indirect, such as when we describe a person's radiant smile and thus interpret the smile as if it were a source of light without explicitly saying so. Although metaphorical language is crucial to diverse discourses, poets are metaphorically more inventive than other writers. Philosophy, science, and everyday parlance rely to a greater extent on faded metaphors and cliches. Moreover, we read poetry with a heightened attentiveness to its metaphoricity. We tend to employ the vernacular naively and to over-identify scientific statements with literal truth. We are thereby prone to overlook the inadequacies of a metaphor. In short, poetic language invites us to draw new connections between things without failing to distinguish their differences or particularities. In my own poetry, I frequently draw metaphorical connections that suggest the mindedness of plants and the plant-likeness of the human mind. For example, I describe plant formations as artistic creations of nature, and conversely describe artistic processes as resembling the formative development of plants. The notion of a deep continuity between nature's formations and artworks has been articulated by many poets and philosophers since the Romantic era. In this vein, the great German poet and scientist Goethe wrote that both in nature and in art, the sole and supreme process is the creation of form, end quote. Nevertheless, it is important to aim to do justice both to the connections and the characteristic differences between plant formations and human artworks. Fresh metaphors have this twofold capacity. My poem titled Anonymous, which portrays a horse chestnut tree, offers a clear example of a plant as a self-expressive artistic form. I'll read the short poem in full. What about the chestnut tree in the cemetery, replete with foliage, erecting countless steeples of blossoms, each consisting of images that capture the essence in a couple of strokes, a dash of red or yellow on white, and the perfect fragments blown to the grass. Does anyone else come here to see them? The displays of this artist, unknown even to herself. The tall conical inflorescences or panicles are metaphorically depicted as architectural formations, steeples. The individual flowers are described as paintings, just as we might speak of a masterful painting as capturing the essence of its subject in a few strokes. Here the plant expresses its own essence in a dash of yellow or red on white. The portrayal of fallen flowers as perfect fragments implies that individual parts of the tree convey a sense of the whole tree, just as, for example, a fragment of sculpture can intimate the character of the whole sculpture. The final lines explicitly refer to the tree as an artist deserving of greater appreciation, though she might not have a self-reflexive awareness of herself as one. In light of the growing body of research suggesting the mindedness of plants, perhaps this implication of a lack of self-consciousness could be taken as a stimulus to debate rather than as a definitive statement. Either way, the poem's personification of the tree invites us to see the plant as an active subject rather than as an impersonal object. Through its metaphors, the poem asks the reader to contemplate the tree as a minded, artistic, and self-expressive agent. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you for sharing your poetry and your beautiful writing as well. Wow. Well, I knew that there was going to be sympathetic magic going on in this session with all these poets, writers, and artists. And so let's bring Guto, another amazing artist, connecting with us from Brazil. Guto, thank you. Go ahead.
Hello, Monica. Thank you, everybody. I'm very excited to be here and I'm very glad to have met Monica down here in Brazil. And what I just brought here, I'd like to share is one of my works, one of the last works called VRS, Vegetal Reality Shelter. I'm gonna share a little video. This, but you can listen, I hope. That's the sound of the forest. This work was created, inspired on an experience I had at the Amazon forest for 10 days in a residence, artistic residence. And I record sounds of the forest, and it was introduced to this work mixed with image of the forest that's mirrored. So what you can see is project inside this dome, and the experience I try to bring is the immersion in the forest, somehow metaphorical approach for this experience of being in the forest. That was the most amazing experience for me. So I remember when I was there at the forest, in the middle of the jungle, alone and surrounded by those amazing trees. And it was when the inspiration for this work happened. And my work has been playing with technology and mix in a hybrid situation, plants and technology. I measure electricity from the leaves, resistance, galvanic response from the leaves, and I use this to control systems, robotic systems. In this case, when you are in the process of breathing inside the dome, you trigger the image and also modulate the sounds that you are listening. So I like the idea of breathing, and is so fundamental for life. And the idea is to mix the experience of breathing with the images of the plants, and recover a little bit the experience of being in the jungle. So that's the word. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Guto. That was amazing. For anybody who has been in the jungle, it felt quite close, quite real. So beautiful work, intersection between your artistic, your magic, and just the playfulness of the entire thing. So thank you for sharing with us. Again, another amazing poet. I'm just surrounded by all these amazing people. Craig Santos Perez, please go ahead.
Half a day. Thank you so much, Monica and John and Patricia and everybody involved in the Mind the Plants project and this symposium. So inspiring to hear everybody's work. I'm going to share a poem called Family Trees. I'm calling in from, or zooming in from Hawaii, but I am originally from the Micronesian island of Guam. As some of you might know, Guam is a US territory, and 30% of our island is occupied by US military bases, including much of our jungles. Unfortunately, what is happening back home right now is that the US military is clearing thousands of acres of the jungle to make space for a firing range for their weapons. And so I wrote this poem partly as a protest to this clearing and the damage it's going to cause to many of the native trees. There is one tree in particular I mentioned called the Hadzun Lagu. And this is an endangered tree. There's actually only one last tree on island left. And you'll hear a little bit. It's right in the area called the Tekzan, which is the wildlife refuge that they are clearing. There are other words in my native language, Chamorro, and those are names of some of the other trees as well. Family trees. Before we entered the jungle, my dad asked permission of the spirits who dwell within. Then he closes his eyes to teach me how to listen. Ekunguk. As the winds exhale and billow the canopy, tremble the understory, and conduct the wild orchestra of all living things. Nizuk, Lemai, Ifit, Nunu, he chants in a tone of reverence, calling forth the names of each tree, each elder who has provided us with food and medicine, clothes and tools, canoes and shelter. Like us, roots anchor them to this island, giving breath, giving strength to reach towards the Pacific sky and blossom. When you take, my dad says, take with gratitude and never more than what you need. He teaches me the phrase eminent domain, which means theft, means to turn a place of abundance into a base for destruction. The military is uprooting trees with bulldozers, pave the fertile earth with concrete, and plant toxic chemicals and ordinances in the ground. Barbed wire fences spread like invasive vines, whose only fruit are the cancerous tumors that bloom on every branch of our family tree. Today, the military invites us to collect plants and trees within Litekzan, slated to be cleared for impending construction. Fill out the appropriate forms and wait 14 business days for a background check. If we receive their permission, they escort us into the jungle so we can mark and claim the trees we want delivered to us after removal. They say this is a benevolent gesture, but why does it feel like a cruel reaping? My dad never showed me the endangered Hadzun Lagu, the last mother tree struggling to survive in Litekzan, its only home. Don't worry, the military tells us. We'll erect a fence around the tree. They call this mitigation, yet why does it feel like the disturbed edge of extinction? Ekunguk, listen, an ancient wind rouses the jungle. Ekunguk, listen, Ichonkin Lemai calls us to spread our arms wide. Ekunguk, Ichonkin Nunu calls us to link our hands. Listen, Ichonkin Ifit calls us to be firm. Ekunguk, Ichonkin Nizuk calls us to never break. Listen, Ihalam Tanu Zanitata Mutna, call us to rise, to surround our family of trees and chant Ahi. No, we do not give you permission. Thank you. Mahalo. Saina ma'asi.
Mahalo to you. My goodness, beautiful. Thank you. I think that deserves a moment of silence. Thank you, Craig. And then we have next someone that is showing some incredible commitment, like Barry McDonald in all its wounds and bandages, and accompanied by Uncle Rob. Thank you so much for this incredible commitment. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Monica. No worries. We didn't want to miss this, did we, Rob?
Never. All right, brothers, I'd like to give a welcome to where we are, the Radan Culture Group of the Near One Peoples. I asked for the land we trust in here to give us our blessing, and I asked for the ancestors and spirits to give us our blessing. And I also asked for all those involved today that the lands that they are on and trust in, and the ancestors and spirits that give their blessing as well. I hope that we all stay safe and well.
Thanks, Bono. Okay, our reflection today won't be concentrating so much on the particular mind of plants as the sharing of a bigger mind that all of creation is involved with. And this springs out of this reflection springs out of the story that I wrote for the Mind of Plants volume that detailed an unusual happening on land that on which I lived, where a couple of specimens of a species of tree called the longleaf corkwood sprang up out of area, sprang up in country that it shouldn't grow in. Now, it turned out that these particular trees were actually a dreaming story tree, and that the land that they came up on was part of the track that dreaming story travelled through. So, in a sense, it was interpreted by me as, and not only me, but by other people I spoke to, as an emanation of that dreaming. Okay, that's just to bring you up to date with the story. Okay, so we're not going to describe that mind that I mentioned earlier, that as the universal mind or a world soul. Rather, we take our cue from Australian Indigenous wisdom and refer to the sentient spirit that informs the whole of creation as the land. And Rob and I spoke about this before we got on, and we're both in agreement here. This is how we see the situation. The land is the English translation of the word that describes the phenomenon that we're talking about in several Aboriginal languages. According to the learning that both of us have received from elders, the land includes everything, the world and all that's on it and in it, the seas, the sky, the celestial entities, and people and plants. And it seems that people and plants, in common with other beings, have roles to play as agents of the land and dreaming. So in terms of their relationship with humans, plants are efficacious medicinally and nutritionally inasmuch as they channel the beneficent power of the land. The effect that plants will have in other relationship networks would no doubt be similarly described. And I have no doubt that these roles that plants played, that these roles of plants are consciously played. The story that I'm referring to that was contributed to the Mind of Plants volume talks about another side shown to us by plants, and that is as avatars of dreaming ancestors. Not quite accurate to say that they're avatars, because they are considered to be those ancestors. So in the way of Aboriginal ontology, entities can have multiple existences, so they can be both this and that and the other. And in this case, the ancestors can present themselves as human and as trees. When the two corkwood saplings shot up most mysteriously on my house block, the action seems to have been primarily a communication. I wonder if it's narcissistic or too human-centric or even paranoid schizophrenic to consider the communication as a messaging to me. I do maintain caution there, but I also entertain the idea that the trees were conveying a communication to me from the land, one amongst a persistent and insistent suite of communications involving other beings besides plants. These communications were not random or chaotic, however, they were unified by story, the dreaming story that travels through the block of land upon which I lived. And the corkwood's message could not operate in isolation. There were other communications that were required to supply it with context, including revelations of the narrative action of the local story. The relations are complex. Why I was contacted by the land, I don't know. Perhaps propinquity will inevitably involve a human in the ongoing narrative of a living dreaming story, and the communications are simply to raise one's awareness of that fact. And maybe some people notice and some people don't. Maybe it happens all the time. Some might hear, but not wish to heed. I did listen, and I'm pretty sure that I've been implicated in that story. But whatever that might mean, in the end, it all boils down to awareness of relationship, of just how radically interrelated is the world, including humans. In the Corkwood story, my aunt spoke of how ancestors might manifest as trees, and in so doing move from node to node along their storyline. My sister, also in the story, but her words are outside the story now, uses the example of plants to make the very same point in a more secular discussion from a book we produced, hopefully soon to be published. And this is my sister's words. We still live within the way of seeing how land formation is connected with people, plants, waters, animals, and whatever's on the land. We see the connections happening all the time, not only with animals, but also in the life cycles of plants. In our language, we don't talk about a plant that's just standing there and nothing happens. The plant grows, it bears limbs, it bears leaves, it flowers, then it drops seeds. Seeds may fall on the ground, or wind comes, blows them away. The plant not only grows there and stands still, it moves to different areas because the seeds have been taken by the wind, maybe by birds as well. It's also like yams that grow in the river. They get washed out, they travel with the running waters and resprout elsewhere. Again, trees collapse and fall. They might get washed downstream and they might throw their roots and start growing somewhere else. Anything has to have a relationship for it to be what it is or who it is or how it is. We use our language to describe that cycle or process. We talk about it in the way that it began, and it's here and it's there and it's ongoing. It isn't just here or there and stops. And we don't only see those relationships and describe them, we're a part of those actual relationships ourselves. These cycles happen everywhere on the land. That's how everything exists and continues on for the sake of the people, as well as for the sake of the land and everything to do with it. So we've always helped keep those cycles going. Now, the point of, well, my sister made that point very clearly about the purpose of communication and relationship. I just want to quote from Kimera, who was
running out of time. So
okay, yep, no worries. Now I'll just wrap it up there. But look, thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and attention. Thanks, Monica, for inviting us and for making this possible.
Thank you so much. And of course, I just want to make clear once again that, you know, you shared much more in your essay that is part of the book. So a lot of the sharing that, you know, I'm cutting you off from, that people can find it there. And then I guess they can be free to contact you and continue the conversation. This is part of the idea of this entire network of like connecting people and creating those relationships. So I hope people understand that this is why at the beginning of today, I said, this is just a beginning of relating and expanding that network of relationships. So thank you so much.
No worries, I totally understand. Thank you very much, Monica.
Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Rob. John Ryan, my co-author, co-editor, co-conjurer, go for it.
Thank you, Monica. Great. Okay, I'm speaking from Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. And interestingly, the word Ubud derives from the Balinese word ubad for medicine, and more specifically referring to the plant medicine of the area. But this story in the mind of plants comes from Central Java. A humid wind whisks the yellowing oval leaves on the dusty ground below an old banyan. It is the end of the dry season in Central Java. Slowed by the midday heat, I walk around the perimeter of the Candi Mendut site. This small temple is less than 3 miles from the famous Buddhist complex, Borobudur. In the haven of the tree's broad shouldering canopy, a chattering boy swings with bliss from aerial roots draping to the ground like thick ropes. Chickens dart skittishly across the courtyard. Relinquishing his grip on the fibrous cables, the child imitates the rooster's crow, then chases futilely after the hens. My lower back crackles as I hunch down to inspect a curious alcove formed by the appendages of the sacred tree. Here, a jar wrapped snugly in sky blue fabric contains an unseen offering. According to interpretations of an ancient stone text in Old Javanese and Sanskrit, King Indra constructed this Chandi Mendut temple during the early 9th century AD. The text attributes the name Venu Vanu Mandira, or bamboo temple grove, to the monument. Mendut consists of a large central temple with a square terrace surrounded by the remains of smaller brick stupas. A vaulted chamber, musky, cool, and saturated with prayer, encloses statues of the Buddha and 2 bodhisattvas seated opposite one another. Relief sculptures adorning the temple's volcanic stone exterior depict other bodhisattvas sheltered by the tree of awakening, under which Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, attained enlightenment. To be precise, the Bodhi tree of the Buddhist tradition is a fig, pipal or Ficus religiosa, closely related to the banyan that now presides over Chandi Mendut. Although lacking the devotion of my predecessors, I am likewise inclined to find shade and contemplate the spiritual, historical, and cultural resonances here. A placard near my bench gives this title, Pohan Dewata, Tree of the Gods, to this behemoth. On the map, an orange splotch reminds me, correctly so, that Saya Dasini, I am here. Outside the low iron gate surrounding the temple compound, 2 less mature banyans are sentries at a crossroads. Beneath their outspread boughs, a woman sells jamu, a decoction of ginger, turmeric, and other herbs, as a scent of fried rice mixes with motorbike exhaust. Beside the trunks, supine men appear as if locked forever in a stupor. The sleepy scene lies on an east-west axis considered an ancient pilgrimage route by archaeologists, crossing the Elo and Progo rivers before intersecting with the temples Pawan and Borobudur. Together with the fig trees, the 3 temples constitute a spiritual unity, linking the built environment to the vegetal world and connecting the immaterial to the sensory. I swallow the bittersweet brew, hoping it will ease the hacking cough I've acquired since coming to the Chedu Plain in the shadow of volatile Mount Marapi. What is the mind of the banyan? How might we come to appreciate the mindedness of botanical life at a point in the history of the planet when such a realization seems especially crucial to the future of all life? These are the questions I'll conclude with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. What a question to conclude on. I guess we can discuss more in a minute because we have our last contributor, Jessica White, and then we have Q&A. So I would like also to remind everyone, put your questions on the chat and then we can go through them and share. Go for it, Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Monica. Good morning, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Ghana country in Adelaide, in Australia. And I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Ghana people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians in Australia as this country's oldest storytellers. I think it's really important that we listen to their voices. Thank you to Monica, Lee, John and Patricia for putting this wonderful book, The Mind of Plants, together, as well as this fabulous symposium. I think it's brilliant to hear all these different perspectives on plants. And I also want to acknowledge the work of John Ryan, who just spoke before me. He's written a lot on the area that I'm writing about in southwest Western Australia, and I've found his writing so engaging and useful. So the piece which I chose for the book is Leschenantia biloba, or the blue Leschenantia, That's its common name. I haven't yet been able to locate the Noongar name for it. I'm working on that. The Noongar people are the traditional custodians of southwest Western Australia. The area is a biodiversity hotspot. That's an area which features high percentages of plant life found nowhere else on Earth, which are at exceptional risk of extinction. And almost half of the plants in this area are found nowhere else on Earth. And Leschenoltia biloba is one of these plants. So I'm just going to read a small fragment from my essay to describe it. And in this section, the person is driving their car, has been captivated by the plant, and they've stopped by the side of the road. You open the camera on your phone, crouch down and snap a shot, capturing the flower's fine petals. They open from a creamy throat dusted with fine hairs. You notice the two lobes on each petal from which the species takes its name, biloba. You angle the phone to shoot them against the sky. They are the same colour, only their outline distinguishes plant from air. So the blue Leschenoltia is one of the plants that I'm writing about in my eco-biography of Georgiana Malloy, Western Australia's first non-Indigenous female scientist. And she arrived at what is now Augusta in southwest Western Australia in 1830. So while a biography is about a person, an eco-biography is about that person's interaction with their environment and how it shapes their sense of self. And with my essay on the blue Leschenoltia in the mind of plants and in my book in general, I'm writing about specific plants in southwest Western Australia and how humans interacted with them. So this means talking about their presence in deep time, how Noongar people interacted with them, and how colonisers and collectors such as Georgiana Malloy and her contemporary James Drummond responded to them. So the blue Leschenoltia is a striking plant. It's been on Earth for about 67 million years. Noongar people used it to detect the change in seasons, particularly the slowing of the rainy season and the onset of warmer days. The Noongar calendar has 6 seasons, not 4, because the 4 seasons of spring, summer, winter and autumn is a British sense of the weather, and it doesn't really work in southwest Western Australia. And the plant continues to flower as the rain slows and the days become hotter and drier through Jilba, that's August and September, Camberang, which is October and November, and Summer Birak in December and January. The plant's Latin name came from Robert Brown, that's the southwest Western Australia, and Brown was a botanist on Matthew Flinders' expedition to circumnavigate Australia from 1801 to 1804, and he named it after this botanist, Jean-Baptiste Theodore Leschenot de la Tour, when Flinders' ship met French navigator Nicolas Baudin's ship, on which Leschenot was collecting at what was called Encounter Bay. They called it Encounter Bay. So the naming of the plant signifies connection and friendship, as well as disconnection, because it was named as part of this process of empire building and colonisation. So Georgiana Malloy began collecting seeds and specimens for an English horticulturalist, James Mangles, in 1837. She didn't know the specific names for the plants, so she gave them a seed and gave the seeds and the specimens a number, and she waited for Mangles to send the names of the plants to her. In a letter of 1837, she wrote to him, quote, "If number 61 does not prove evanescent, you will be in ecstasies with its lovely, brilliant blue." And I think this is the usual response to the plant, and I think it's the one that she was talking about. And it's so aesthetically pleasing that the British horticulturalists were really excited about it when they started growing it in England. So Drummond, I mentioned, was a contemporary of Georgiana's, and he collected for Mangles and for William Hooker, director of Kew Gardens. And some of his specimens were grown at James Veitch's nursery in Exeter in 1840 in the British spring of the following year. And one small plant was exhibited at the Horticultural Society, and it won a silver medal. So they're very, very excited about it. People loved its colour, and they kept trying to grow it. And they still do. In Australia, it's a very, very popular plant for cultivation in gardens. So meanwhile, back in Australia, while they were growing them in England, Drummond was writing about the flowers that he encountered for the local newspaper. And he described the plant's colouring as celestial blue. And I think that's an apt reference to the sky or the heavens that the flower resembles. And the plant's continuing to captivate people today, and scientists in Japan have done tests to try and work out the composition of its colour. So that's a really, really brief history of this plant's sojourn on Earth and its encounters with human beings. And I describe these encounters to show the plant's use and its charisma. It has an effect on humans. They recognise it when they're out in the bush. Some of them want to name it, they want to grow it, they want to sit and admire it, either in their gardens or out in the bush. So the people are minding the plant. And I think that illuminating these relationships with plants and the way that people pay attention to them is of critical importance at a time when so many plants in southwest Western Australia and in the world more generally are under threat and going extinct. So I'll just leave that there, and I'm happy to answer any more questions in the Q&A coming up.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you so much. And of course, I know these plants very well because I lived in WA for like almost 10 years. And I did put it in my garden too. And I have seen it everywhere, and it's beautiful. So it definitely grabs our mind. I was one of those.
Yeah, wonderful.
Can I please bring and invite everyone that has participated on the panel to put their screens up? Yeah. And welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so there are a couple of questions from the audience. And one is for you, Guto. And I think it sounds like it sounds just like as a simple question, but actually I think that it's a very important one. So the question is, incredible. Are all these sounds natural? And I think it opens up a very beautiful kind of worms because, you know, defining the natural and the relationship between the natural and sound. So go for it if you want to take it on.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that Merit brought this question. First of all, to bring the knowledge that it was a collaboration with my friend Augustine Ledar, an artist from the UK, and he recorded some of these sounds. The sounds are natural in the sense they are captured from the forest. But of course, what's natural in terms of the poetry and the creation of an artwork. So this is a combination. And also, I'd like to point, I'm not sure if it was clear through the video, but the sound are modulated by the act of breathing inside the dome. So it's a combination of the natural sounds and also my performance inside the dome. So the reaction to the images and my feelings inside is supposed to be an immersive experience.
It was definitely immersive. I was like, wow, I feel totally there, as I shared before. This actually makes me think of it as well of Renata, of your work, because you also take the natural and make it, I guess, yours through your own practice. And is that, to me, your work is not less natural because you intervened, actually simply continuation of the natural, right? But maybe you want to discuss that more. And you need to put your, yeah, thank you.
Yes, so actually it's interesting that the connection here too with our work. So when I work with plants and collect the samples, usually with very specific plants, and work with the process of decomposition. So I'm kind of trying to look at it as I want to learn from it, and I want to share the fact that we all part of it. We all part of that cycle of life, and that the composition process continues that transformative action of plants' life, as we've heard in previous sessions, and the transformation happens to both the plant matter and the photographic analog emulsions that I work with to create their work, and they kind of interact with each other over several weeks, incorporating also microorganism and bacteria. So yes, part of the natural putting together and letting them do their thing.
Mm. There is another question that might connect to you, and it just popped in the chat for me, and it was like, what are the mechanisms whereby art can work to create social change? And this obviously is open also for all of the poets and the writers. How do you balance this desire with aesthetic considerations?
Very good question. I think when I work with plants, I let them on this journey, and basically I show you what happened during the decay process. And in fact, it's both with sound and visuals. And because for the first time last year, I was working with Leah Barclay and a couple of other collaborators. And in fact, we have recorded the sound of the Yambi plant during that process to incorporate in the audiovisual projections. So the aesthetics come from the plant itself, obviously, but also the materials that I work with and the length of time, the bacteria that's present, because every time I make work, it will be somewhere else. For example, it might be on the island, like I was working with medicinal plants on Stradbroke Island. And so the environment will actually influence the effect and the result. And you might see in some of my work, you can see very, very decayed plants. Some of them don't decay as fast or as beautiful, what we could perhaps call it, as far as aesthetic goes. So when I focus on a specific plant, it is what it is after the several weeks of the process. And some of them are more or less aesthetically pleasing actually to our eyes. So some people may, perhaps prefer or enjoy one to the other.
I guess this is also connected to, especially for poetry, there is this idea that poetry needs to be just beautiful and pleasing too, right? And yet, some of the most potent poetry is the one that kind of disturb you, and it leaves you a little bit like, And I was really touched by your sharing, Craig, because that's what I felt your work was actually doing. Is like, it's creating an uncomfortable feeling, which I need to feel, because that's part of the impact that I guess is connected to like how does art basically and this kind of expression drive social change. So you might want to elaborate on that.
Yes, thank you. So that poem was actually also written for an event on Guam for the Guam Soil and Water Conservation Symposium. And it was a group that was, talking about conservation, and they asked me to write a poem about trees, but it's very, very difficult to write a poem about trees on Guam when all our trees are being cut down. And so I wanted to try to weave that message, the political message, into the aesthetics of the poem so that it has a tension both between the aesthetics and the ethics. And to me, that, at least in my own context, that's always a balance I struggle with. But it's a very good challenge to find a way to express your message in politics, but at the same time have some poetic techniques and elements to it that could speak to people on an emotional level as well.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to chime in there? Luke.
Thought I'd say a few words. Yes. There's lots of ways, of course, that art and poetry have been engaged with activism and environmental activism and other kinds of activism, and will continue to be, and so on. But I think what's particular to the aesthetic in some way is the way that it can engage our imaginations, our sensibility, our hearts, as someone said earlier, and that's part of what we need to kind of expand our awareness beyond our limited mindsets and view of nature as something external to us and so on. So I think insofar as the aesthetic can integrate us on an emotional and intellectual level, and also bring us in relationship to the wider world, that art has a role to play. And obviously there's all sorts of specific ways that might get involved in politics or express political standpoints and ethical standpoints, but I think that's a key factor to the aesthetic factor as significant in itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to just jump in and add or talk about the importance of longer forms as well, such as life writing, novels, creative nonfiction, and particularly with life writing, you can show a human life, but you can also show how non-human life impacts on it and shapes it. So what I'm trying to do is show that the plants die, we die too. That's what I say to everyone, because people are just so unaware. And if I can get that simple message across in a very creative and engaging way, then I think that's a form of activism through aesthetics. But I'm doing it over a longer scale with a story. It's the storytelling is important. Yeah.
Which I guess is perfect because it connects with what Barry and Uncle Rob were sharing before. And maybe, Barry, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on this? And how, I guess, the importance of, telling the stories is not necessarily just about the human, but also about these others, and which ultimately is the story of life, because I guess there is no really difference between us and them. Like, we are all made of the same spirit. And you will have to unmute yourself, sorry.
Yes, and we all participate in the same consciousness. That's the point we were making, Uncle Rob.
Yeah.
I tend to see, I don't know, I find it hard to find the dividing line between life and art. Increasingly, I'm finding that more difficult, and finding it difficult to find what divides art from other forms of communication, whether it's actually mediated, in a form like paper and pen, or film, or audio, or whatever, or just direct communication, being to being. So I find it a difficult question to answer, actually, Monica. I don't consider myself an artist, even though I do involve myself in sort of certain what are considered artistic activities. Anyway, Rob, do you have anything to say?
Not at this time. No, you covered it.
It's okay. I guess that is a provocation, because I find that in the end we all are the artist.
Yeah.
We are all painting and designing and co-creating, collaborating all the time. The question is, and is a word that is emerged throughout since this morning, is like, are you aware of it? Are you actually present with it? And then many of these questions, I guess, become non-questions, because if you are actually aware of it and present with it, then you just simply know, because you're living it and you're being that. So, but thank you so much.
As Luke pointed out earlier, that the tree itself is an artist. I mean, the metaphor was expressed, and I'm not sure that that I see. I mean, I see the whole of existence in a sense as metaphor. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. And there was a question about where I'm speaking
philosophical from. And big questions that I guess deserve a big time, and maybe around the fire. That's how I see it. But unfortunately, we don't have any more time, so I had to close it here. But as I said before, and I reiterate, please this space is designed to keep people networking and connecting and talking. So it's very easy. Anybody can just connect with anybody by just going to their profile and sending a direct message, or just please, this is only the beginning. We're just planting seeds, and hopefully we want to see them grow, not just like perish with the end of this symposium. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. What a wonderful mix of people again. And so grateful again for your participation, not just in the symposium, but also in the bigger project, because I know that we've been working together now for a while, sharing and exchanging writings. And so the book is going to be amazing because of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're going to just close out this session with a very brief introduction between Monica and I with the photography project and the photography map. It looks like there is some incredible images that have come throughout the morning. There's over 123 shots up there now. So in a moment, I'll screen share and just have a look at a few of them. But this is one of the incredible ways that we can use the ArtsFront platform with these digital tools that can allow us to connect to different environments across the planet. So obviously we're all very connected in this online system at the moment, but this is an opportunity to travel around to different parts of the world where all of the presenters and delegates are joining us from, and get a sense of the plants that we're connected to on different parts of the planet. So you can, from wherever you are, upload directly images from your computer, your laptop, or you'll see on the tab, which I'll share in a second, there's a link where you can basically just SMS a photo upload link and then go outside for a walk throughout lunchtime and basically upload some photos. And there's a provocation around this, which is the idea of looking up, looking down and looking forward. And there are 3 provocations that actually launched this photography map idea as part of the Field Trip Symposium, a symposium that ran last year, which is really looking at the exact conversation we were just having around the intersections between art, science, technology, and the environment, and really what's the value of creative possibilities in reimagining our future and really connecting the dots. And the photography project was led by Tricia King, who's a lecturer in photography at USC, who came up with these provocations to get us started. So unless Monica would like to add any more to that, I might screen share and then we can add some more reflections afterwards.
We can add after. Go for it.
Excellent. So I'm just going to screen share. So you can see now we've got our photo feed down here. So you can click through and look at any of the images from here, but I'm going to go straight to the photo map. You can swap it to satellite mode when it loads, and then basically scroll around the planet and look at some of the incredible images that have been popping up. So during this lunch break, we'd encourage you to go outside and take photos, obviously, but we would also encourage you to connect and explore with the photos that are being uploaded.
Yeah, beautiful.
I'm just going to go back to those incredible shots down around Santiago, which came in this morning.
Yeah.
And I might just stop screen sharing there and show you where the links are. Yeah, so basically you can upload directly from this panel. You can upload from the main ArtsFront tab where you joined the symposium, or you can just click the link directly to your phone there. Do you want to add any more to that, Monica?
I just wanted to say, I guess, in following up on the idea of the provocation, which I really love, that's why I totally, pinched it. And because of course, Trisha was the genius behind this. And I think it is genial because I did it this morning for myself, and I went outside and I took a photo looking up, and I had to see the sun coming through the lights of the sunlight coming through the leaves of the big trees that are around me. And then I had to look down, and I suddenly saw all the little moss that was growing just under my feet. And then, and he had the dew on top, so it was beautiful. And then looking forward also gave me this idea. So I went from the big on the top, then micro on the bottom. And then I had to look at myself, like, where am I positioned in this? And so I'm sandwiched and surrounded by these trees, and they are big and small, plants that are big and small. And I think it's really useful to connect with your own positioning, literally the embodied self in space and in connection or in kinship with these others. So I really want to invite people to really do it kind of mindfully, as if it was a ritual. We talked about this morning in terms of rituals. So do it with awareness and really enjoy the taking of these pictures. It's not just about, take some shots and put them on the map, or like really enjoying. And when you share, so that you can really share something that feels really precious because it's close to you, and it's sharing that life with you. So yeah, and of course this is true, like you don't have to just do it in this 1 hour break, but you can do it throughout the rest of the day and enjoy. So thank you, Leah, for showing the platform and how to navigate.
No problem at all. All right, we will wrap that session up there, and we'll see you all after your photography adventures and lunch break.